Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I work as an accountant and bought my house when I was 28. It's nothing fancy, just a 3-bedroom place in a quiet neighborhood where I could raise my 2 kids after my divorce. The mortgage payments were tight at first, but I managed to make it work by taking on extra clients during tax season. My teenagers and I had built a good life there. My next door neighbors were this sweet elderly couple who'd been there since the neighborhood was built. The husband would always wave when he saw me coming home from work, and his wife would bring over cookies during the holidays. When he had his heart attack last year, I was devastated. He was only 73 and seemed so healthy. His wife was heartbroken, and a few weeks later she told me she couldn't bear staying in the house without him. Her daughter had been begging her to move closer, so she decided to sell and start fresh in another city. That's when the nightmare began. The new owners were a couple in their early 50s who moved in like they owned the entire block. From day one, they were demanding neighbors make changes to their houses because it was bringing down their property value. The wife had apparently been on some homeowners association board in their previous neighborhood, so she was used to bossing people around and getting her way. 3 months after they moved in, she showed up at my door one evening. I was helping my daughter with her math homework when the doorbell rang. I opened the door and asked if I could help her. She told me she needed to come in because we had important business to discuss. I wasn't thrilled about it, but my parents raised me to be polite to neighbors, even difficult ones. I invited her in and offered her some orange juice. She complained that the juice tasted like it was from concentrate and asked if I had anything fresh. I bit my tongue and sat down across from her. I asked what she wanted to talk about. She started explaining that her son was getting married in 6 months and that they were looking to buy him a house as a wedding gift since he couldn't afford one himself. I congratulated her and told her that was nice of them. I had no idea why she was telling me this. Was she asking for recommendations on real estate agents? Did she want to know about the neighborhood? I waited for her to get to the point. Then she said she wanted to buy my house for him. I was confused and asked what house she meant, explaining that I didn't own any rental properties or anything like that. She clarified that she meant this house, the one we were sitting in right now. I stared at her, trying to process what she'd just said. I asked if she really wanted to buy my house, the house I lived in. She confirmed that was exactly what she meant and asked if I owned it or was renting. I told her of course I owned it, but said I didn't understand because this was where I lived. I asked where I would go if I sold it to her. She said that wasn't really her problem and that I could move to another state or something. She added that it was my choice and that she wasn't forcing anything on me. I felt like I'd been slapped. I stood up so fast my chair nearly tipped over. I yelled at her to get out. She asked what was wrong with me. I screamed at her to get out of my house right now and asked if she was insane. She started saying something about how rude I was as she headed for the door, but I kept yelling until she left. She stood in my front yard for a few minutes calling me names until I threatened to call the police for harassment. Over the next few weeks, Karen made my life miserable. She blasted music at odd hours, called the city to complain about imaginary violations with my property, and even had her son send some sketchy guys to my office and house to talk to me about selling. I started documenting everything and considered getting a restraining order. Then things got really scary. I came home from work one Tuesday to find both my kids standing in the front yard. My daughter was crying and shaking and my son looked pale. I asked what was wrong and what had happened. My son told me there was a snake in the house. I asked if he was sure. My daughter said it was huge and that it was in the living room when they got home from school. This made no sense. We don't have snakes in our area. The neighborhood is nowhere near any woods or natural habitats where snakes would live. I called 911 and animal control immediately and made the kids stay outside. The animal control officers arrived within 15 minutes and spent over an hour searching the house. They found one snake and spent another 30 minutes making sure there weren't any others. Several neighbors came out to see what was happening and tried to comfort my kids, which I really appreciated. Karen and her husband never came outside once. I noticed them peeking through their curtains, but they seemed strangely calm about the whole situation. A tiny voice in my head wondered if they had something to do with it, but I felt guilty for even thinking that. I told myself I was being paranoid because of our earlier confrontation. It took weeks for my kids and me to feel comfortable in the house again. We were constantly checking corners and jumping at shadows. My daughter barely slept for days. 2 weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night to horrible screaming coming from outside. I checked on my kids, called the police, and ran outside to see what was happening. The screaming was coming from my backyard. When I got there, I found Karen lying on her back with two snakes crawling on her. She was shrieking that she'd been bitten and couldn't move. I grabbed a long stick and tried to push the snakes away while yelling at her to get up and run. She kept crying that she was paralyzed. The police and paramedics arrived quickly and got the situation under control. Karen was taken to the hospital, screaming the entire time about how she was going to have me arrested for keeping dangerous snakes on my property. The next morning, my son reminded me about something I had completely forgotten. He pointed out that I had installed security cameras after the first snake incident and suggested we should check what happened last night. I felt like an idiot for not thinking of it myself. We pulled up the footage and saw something unbelievable. The video showed Karen sneaking into our backyard around midnight carrying what looked like a cloth bag. She was holding it very carefully, like she was afraid of what was inside. She crept over to our basement door, which had a small gap at the bottom because the wood was warped, and started to open the bag. She was clearly trying to dump whatever was in the bag through the gap and into our house. But when she opened it, one of the snakes came out and started moving toward her instead of toward the house. She panicked and fell backward, and that's when the second snake escaped from the bag she was still holding. Both snakes ended up on her, and she was too terrified to move properly, which is probably why she got bitten. I was furious. This woman had terrorized my family not once, but twice, putting my children in danger with her insane scheme to force me out of my house. I made a copy of the video and took it straight to the police station to file charges. The legal process took several months, but eventually Karen was found guilty on multiple charges including breaking and entering, reckless endangerment, and harassment. She was sentenced to 10 years in prison. Her husband had to sell their house to pay for legal fees and the settlement we're getting for the emotional trauma she put my family through. I heard their son's fiancée called off the wedding when she found out what his mother had done. I'm a 27-year-old stay-at-home mom with two kids, ages 5 and 1. My life is busy, but I love it. My husband works long hours to support our family, and I handle everything at home. We live paycheck to paycheck, but we make it work. About 2 years ago, my sister started dropping her kids off at my place after school. Her daughter is 8 and her son is 6. At first, it was just a few hours here and there. She'd bring snacks for them and slip me $20 or $30 for watching them. I didn't mind because my kids loved playing with their cousins, and the extra money helped with groceries. My sister has always been the type who expects things to go her way. She was the golden child who never heard the word no. She's successful in her career and makes good money, but she's also used to people bending over backward for her. Everything changed 6 months ago when she met this guy at work. Suddenly, she was head over heels in love and talking about getting married after dating for just 3 months. This guy has 2 kids from his previous marriage, ages 7 and 9, who live in another state with their mom. Last month, my sister called me with big news. She told me excitedly that she was getting married next month and that her fiancé's kids would be moving here permanently to live with them. Then she dropped the bomb. She wanted me to watch all 4 kids after school, treating his children exactly the same as I treated hers. I felt my stomach drop. Going from watching 2 extra kids to 4 was a huge jump. I told her I wasn't sure about that arrangement and explained that I'd need to meet his children first and get to know them before taking on that responsibility. She brushed off my concerns and said that since they were going to be family, I needed to treat them all equally. She acted like getting to know the kids was unnecessary because kids are kids. When I tried to explain that, I thought it was important to know the children I'd be responsible for especially in case of allergies or behavioral issues. She dismissed my worries as overthinking. That conversation ended with her saying she'd call me back, but I had a bad feeling about the whole thing. A week later, she showed up at my door with all four kids in tow. She said that she thought it would be easier to just throw everyone together and let them bond. The two new kids looked uncomfortable and clingy to my sister. I'd only met them twice before at family gatherings, and they barely spoke to me. I said that we had never agreed to this arrangement and that she couldn't just drop them off. She told me not to be difficult and said that they were going to be my niece and nephew soon. When I pressed her about their routines, medical conditions, and what to do in emergencies, she waved off my questions and said I'd figure it out because that's what family does. I watched as she started walking toward her car, planning to leave me standing there with four confused kids. I told her that she needed to take his kids with her because I wasn't comfortable with the situation. She spun around with anger building in her face and asked if I was serious, claiming she had a meeting she couldn't miss. I stood my ground and told her she should have asked me first instead of assuming. She grabbed the two kids and left, calling me completely unreasonable and giving me a look that could kill. 2 days later, she called me again. She said she'd been thinking about our conversation and admitted I was right about needing to know the kids better. She suggested that I could babysit them for short periods over the next few weeks to get used to them. It sounded reasonable, but something felt off. I agreed but said that I still wanted to sit down with her and go over their needs, schedules, and any important information. She dismissed this again, claiming there was nothing special I needed to know and that I should just treat them like any other kids. I explained that every kid is different, some are shy, some are energetic, some have dietary restrictions, and that I needed to know these things. She accused me of making things way more complicated than they needed to be. I pointed out that if something happened to one of them and I didn't know about a medical condition or allergy, it would be a serious problem. The conversation went in circles for 20 minutes before she agreed to bring them over for trial runs. But those trial runs never happened. Instead, 3 weeks later, she showed up at my door again with all four kids. She explained that her fiancé had been called out of town for work, and she had back-to-back meetings all afternoon, so she didn't have time for the gradual approach. I reminded her that we had agreed she would bring them over for short visits first. She shrugged and said that plans change and that's life. I told her it wasn't fair and that I had clearly told her I needed time to get comfortable with this arrangement. She demanded to know why I was being so stubborn about just kids. I explained that I was responsible for their safety and well-being and couldn't do that properly if I didn't know anything about them. She responded sarcastically that all I needed to do was feed them snacks and make sure they didn't burn the house down. Her attitude was infuriating. This wasn't just about babysitting. She was asking me to take on a huge responsibility without any consideration for what I needed to feel comfortable. I told her I wasn't doing this and that she needed to take them with her or find someone else. She acted shocked and demanded to know where she was supposed to find a babysitter on such short notice. I told her that wasn't my problem and that she should have planned better. She accused me of being incredibly selfish, saying that these kids were going to be part of our family. I agreed that was exactly why I wanted to do this right. I wanted to build good relationships with them, not have them dumped on me like unwanted baggage. She threatened that I shouldn't expect her to keep paying me if I was going to be so picky about when and how I helped. I reminded her that I never asked her to pay me in the first place. She had offered. She suggested that maybe she should find someone more professional who wouldn't make such a big deal about everything. I agreed that maybe she should. She left with all four kids, slamming my door behind her. The next week, my mom called me. She said my sister had told her that I was refusing to help with the kids because they weren't blood related. I told my mom that wasn't what this was about at all and explained the whole situation. My mom listened quietly and then said it seemed like my sister was rushing things. She suggested that maybe I could propose a family dinner where everyone could get together. I called my sister. I suggested we have a family dinner so I could get to know her fiancé and his kids better. She dismissed the idea, claiming they didn't have time because they were busy planning the wedding and getting the kids settled. When I pointed out it would just be one evening, she told me bluntly that either I was willing to help their family or I wasn't, and she didn't have time to cater to my anxiety about meeting new people. I said this wasn't about anxiety but about being responsible. She accused me of being controlling and only caring about my own comfort. I told her that wasn't fair and she knew it. She shot back that what wasn't fair was her having to scramble to find childcare because her own sister wouldn't step up when family needed help. I reminded her that I never said I wouldn't help, I just asked for reasonable accommodations. She claimed I was the only one making this complicated before hanging up on me. A few days later, I got a text from her that made my blood boil. She wrote that she had found a daycare that would take all 4 kids after school. It cost $800 a month, but at least they didn't discriminate against non-biological family members. I was furious. She was trying to make me feel guilty by implying I was discriminating, and she was also throwing money in my face like I should feel bad about her having to pay for proper child care. I decided to call her one more time to clear the air. I told her I saw her text and wanted her to understand that this was never about the kids not being blood related. When she asked what it was about then, I explained it was about her not respecting my boundaries or giving me the information I needed to take care of them properly. She asked what information I could possibly need, saying they were normal kids. I listed off basic questions any caregiver should know: food allergies, dinner times, homework routines, screen time rules, medications. These were fundamental things that anyone watching kids should be aware of. There was a long pause before she admitted that his daughter was lactose intolerant and his son had mild ADHD and took medication at dinner time. My heart stopped. These were exactly the kinds of things I needed to know, and she had been planning to leave them with me without mentioning any of it. I pointed out that this proved exactly why I needed to have a proper conversation about their needs. She brushed it off as not a big deal. I asked her what would have happened if I had given his daughter milk or if his son had a reaction because he missed his medication. She casually said I would have figured it out. I told her that wasn't how responsible childcare worked. She responded with a dismissive whatever and said the daycare could handle it. I agreed that I was glad she found a solution that worked for everyone. She accused me of acting like I did her a favor and claimed I made everything unnecessarily difficult. I said that I protected those kids by making sure they'd be in a place where their needs would be properly met. She called me impossible to deal with, so I told her she was entitled and irresponsible before she hung up again. This time I felt vindicated instead of frustrated. The next day my mom called me back. She said my sister had told her about the kids' medical needs and admitted that I was right to ask questions. I told my mom I just wanted to do right by everyone, and she said she knew. She mentioned talking to my sister about being more considerate, but acknowledged that I knew how my sister could be. I did know how she was. My sister had always expected people to accommodate her without question, and she got angry when anyone pushed back. 2 weeks later, I ran into her fiancé at the grocery store. He seemed like a nice guy, and we chatted for a few minutes. He mentioned hearing there was some confusion about after-school care for the kids. I gave a vague response, and he told me that for what it was worth, he thought I was smart to ask about their routines and needs. He said he would want the same thing if someone was watching his kids. I thanked him and said I was starting to think I was being unreasonable. He assured me I wasn't being unreasonable at all and mentioned that he and his ex-wife had to fill out pages of forms when they enrolled the kids in their current after-school program. It felt good to have someone validate my concerns, especially someone who actually knew the kids involved. A month later, my sister called me with an update. She told me the daycare was working out great and that the kids loved it there. I said that was wonderful and that I was happy it worked out. She went on to explain that they had structured activities and helped with homework, admitting it was actually better than what she was planning to ask me to do. I bit my tongue instead of pointing out that a professional daycare with trained staff was obviously better equipped to handle 4 kids with different needs than one overwhelmed aunt. She then apologized for how heated things got between us, explaining that she was stressed about the wedding and trying to blend their families. I said I understood but wished she had listened to my concerns from the beginning. She admitted I was right to have concerns and that she didn't think it through properly. It wasn't a full apology, but it was more than I expected from her. The wedding happened last month, and it was beautiful. The kids all seemed happy and adjusted. My sister looked radiant, and her new husband clearly adored her. At the reception, she pulled me aside and thanked me for standing my ground about the childcare situation. When I asked what she meant, she explained that if I had just given in like she wanted, she never would have looked into proper after-school programs. She said the kids were learning so much more than they would have just hanging out at my house. I asked if she was saying I was right, and she told me not to let it go to my head. We both laughed, and for the first time in months, things felt normal between us. I'm a 41-year-old mom of two, and I've been working the same office job for about 8 years now. I've been pretty independent, maybe too much so according to some people, but that's just how I am. About 4 years ago, I started dating this guy from my neighborhood. He seemed great at first, funny, charming, good with my kids when he met them. He's 46, divorced, no kids of his own, but said he loved being around mine. For the first couple years, things were really smooth. We'd have dinner together a few times a week. He'd come to my kids' soccer games. We'd watch movies on weekends, normal relationship stuff. But then last year, things got rocky. I can't even remember what started it, but we were arguing more often. Little things would set him off, and I started feeling like I was walking on eggshells. One day, he suggested maybe we should take a break and figure things out. I agreed because honestly, I was exhausted from all the tension. During our 6-month break, I threw myself into work and focusing on my kids. There was this co-worker, a nice enough guy who worked in our IT department. He'd been friendly, but during the break, he started asking me to lunch more often, bringing me coffee, that sort of thing. I could tell he was interested in something more, but I just wasn't feeling it. I was polite but made it clear we were just co-workers and friends. Meanwhile, my boyfriend was apparently dating other people during our break. I found out later through mutual friends that he'd been on dating apps and going out regularly. That stung a little, but we weren't together, so technically, he wasn't doing anything wrong. The co-worker got a job offer in another state and was getting ready to move. He had this beautiful orange tabby cat that he'd had for 3 years, but his new apartment didn't allow pets. He knew my kids had been begging me for a cat forever, so he asked if we'd want to adopt him. My co-worker explained that he couldn't take his cat Rusty to his new place and wondered if my family would be interested in adopting him. He mentioned how he knew my kids had been wanting a pet, and he'd rather give Rusty to a family he trusted. I was thrilled by the offer and said yes right away. He told me he had all the cat supplies and that Rusty was neutered and current on his shots. He seemed like a great cat who was good with children. My kids were absolutely thrilled when I brought Rusty home. He settled in perfectly, like he'd been part of our family. The co-worker moved away a few weeks later, and honestly, I barely thought about him after that. We weren't close friends or anything, just friendly co-workers. My boyfriend and I got back together about 2 months after that. Things seemed better at first. We both had time to think, and we were being more careful about communication. Rusty was established as part of our household by then, and my boyfriend didn't seem to have any issues with having a cat around. Fast forward to last week. We were sitting on my couch watching TV, and Rusty jumped up and settled between us like he does. Out of nowhere, my boyfriend pushed the cat off the couch roughly. I asked him what that was about, and he said he was sick of the damn cat. When I pressed him for details since he'd never complained before, he told me I knew exactly what was wrong. He said the cat came from that guy who was trying to get in my pants. I was confused for a second because I honestly never think about my old co-worker anymore. I told him he meant my co-worker who moved away over a year ago and that nothing ever happened between us. I explained that the guy just needed someone to take his cat. My boyfriend insisted that my co-worker was using the cat to try and sleep with me and that I fell for it. He said every time he saw the cat, he thought about that guy trying to make a move on his girlfriend. I tried to explain that wasn't what happened at all, and that even if it was, Rusty was just a cat who'd been part of our family for over a year. I reminded him that the kids loved the cat. He told me he didn't even want to feed Rusty when I wasn't home because it made him sick thinking about where the cat came from. I was starting to get annoyed at this point. The whole thing seemed ridiculous. I told him this was insane and that he was jealous of a cat because of some imaginary scenario he'd created in his head. I made it clear that nothing happened with my co-worker and that I wasn't getting rid of Rusty. He asked if I was choosing a cat over him. I explained that I was choosing not to make unnecessary sacrifices to soothe his weird insecurities. I told him this wasn't about the cat, but about him trying to control what I could and couldn't have in my own house. He left angry that night and I thought maybe he'd cool down and realize how ridiculous he was being. But he kept bringing it up over the next few days. He'd make snide comments about the cat, refused to pet him when the kids asked him to, and kept pushing for me to rehome Rusty. Finally, I'd had enough. I called him and told him we needed to talk. I said the cat thing had gone too far and that either he dropped it completely or we were done. He acted shocked and said he couldn't believe I thought he wouldn't feed my cat. He claimed he was being hyperbolic and had been drinking the other night. He asked if I thought he was a monster. I reminded him that he literally said he didn't want to feed the cat because it reminded him of my co-worker. He turned it around on me and said I was being controlling by threatening to break up with him just for expressing his feelings. He called me dramatic. Then he started laughing. Not a normal laugh, but this mean, mocking laugh I'd never heard from him before. He told me to listen to myself and said I was going to throw away 4 years over a cat. He asked how pathetic that was. That laugh did something to me. It was like a switch flipped and suddenly I could see clearly for the first time in months. I told him he was right. I was choosing the cat over him. I explained that the cat had never tried to manipulate me, gaslight me, or make me feel crazy for having boundaries. He said I was being ridiculous and that I couldn't seriously be comparing him to a cat. I told him I was done with the conversation and done with him. I said I'd pack up whatever stuff he had at my place and drop it off at his work the next day. He kept trying to argue, switching between being apologetic and being angry, but I checked out. I hung up and went to change the code on my door locks. The next day I dropped off a box of his stuff at his office. He texted me for weeks afterward, alternating between angry messages calling me crazy and pathetic messages begging for another chance. I blocked his number after the first week. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.